The deep space listening post, known as Vantage 9, floated in the quiet dark between two dying stars. It was old, built by the Karathi Compact more than 200 years ago, and its only job was to watch. Watch for pirates. Watch for storms of radiation. Watch for anything that moved where nothing should move. Sensor Officer Thul Ka'ana had worked this post for 11 years. In that time he had seen comets, dead ships, and once, a swarm of rogue mining drones that had drifted for so long their fuel cells had turned to dust. He had never seen anything like what appeared on his screen that night. A single blip, then a signal. At first he thought it was noise. Deep space was full of noise. Old radio waves bouncing around. Leftover chatter from long-dead civilizations. Cosmic static that sounded almost like language if you listened wrong. But this was not noise. This was clean. This was clear. This was a voice. Attention. This vessel carries no weapon aimed at you. This vessel carries no intention to harm you. This vessel carries coordinates. Use them as you wish. That was all. No greeting. No name. No request. Just those 4 short sentences, repeated every 10 minutes, broadcast on every open channel at once, as if the speaker did not care who heard it, only that everyone did. Thul sat very still for a long moment. Then he pressed the alarm. Within an hour, 3 more listening posts along the edge of compact space had picked up the same signal. Within 2 hours, it reached the cognate assembly itself, the great meeting hall where the leaders of 9 allied species argued, voted, and occasionally agreed on what to do about the galaxy's problems. The ship itself was easy enough to see once the sensors focused on it. It was long and dark, shaped like a blade, with no ornament, no bright colors, no markings that any database recognized. It did not accelerate hard. It did not hide behind asteroids or use stealth fields, though its hull suggested it easily could have. It simply moved forward, slow and steady, like something that had already decided where it was going, and felt no need to hurry. It did not fire. It did not scan aggressively. It did not send 100 hailing requests demanding answers. It only repeated its message, over and over, patient as a stone. Attention. This vessel carries no weapon aimed at you. This vessel carries no intention to harm you. This vessel carries coordinates. Use them as you wish. Counselor Brenna Ost, of the Farian Concord, was the first to demand an emergency session. She was a tall being, with pale gray skin and eyes like polished silver, and she had spent 40 years in politics, learning that nothing in the galaxy was ever this simple. When she stood before the assembly, her voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a blade through cloth. "We have a ship of unknown origin," she said, broadcasting on every channel, refusing to answer hails, moving directly toward the trade lanes near Iliene space. And it is giving us coordinates. Coordinates to what? We do not yet know. I want to know who built this ship, and I want to know now. A murmur ran through the chamber. 9 species sat in that hall. The tall, careful Farians, the quick-thinking, many-limbed Doshtar, the patient, stone-skinned Rolconi, the gentle, water-loving Iliene, whose ambassador sat closest to the front, her long fingers folded nervously in her lap. And there were others, smaller delegations, all watching the projection of the strange dark ship that hung above the center of the hall like a silent omen. "We have run every database we possess," said the technical officer, a small blue-skinned Doshtar named Varen. "There is no match. No known shipbuilder uses that hull design. No known species uses that language pattern, though our translators processed it without difficulty, which is strange in itself. Whoever built this ship wanted to be understood immediately. They did not want confusion. They wanted clarity. Or they wanted us to feel safe," said Brenna, right before something happened. "There is another detail," Varen added, and here his voice dropped, careful, almost reluctant. "We ran the coordinates the ship keeps repeating. They are not a request for information. They are not a demand, they are a location, a very specific location, far outside any charted region, in the direction the old star maps call the Dead Reach, because nothing has ever been found there worth naming." "A location for what?" asked the Iliene ambassador, her voice soft and worried. Her name was Sail Mora, and she had represented her people for 6 years, ever since the border skirmishes with the Vothrek Dominion had begun eating away at her homeworld's outer colonies one by one. Varen looked at the assembled council, and for a moment, He seemed almost afraid to say it. "We believe," he said slowly, "that the coordinates point to the ship's home, to wherever it came from. It is telling us, unprompted, exactly where to find its people." Silence fell over the chamber. In thousands of years of interstellar contact, no species had ever done such a thing. Every civilization guarded its homeworld's location, like the most precious secret it owned, because a homeworld's location was also its greatest weakness. If an enemy knew where you lived, they could end you in your sleep. Every species that survived long enough to reach the stars had learned this lesson, usually through blood. And now something had shown up, alone, broadcasting no fear, and simply handed over the one secret that should never be given. "It is a trap," said General Dorvan Cass, commander of the Compact's border fleet, a heavy-set Rolconi, whose stone-gray skin was scarred from old battles. "It has to be. No sane species reveals its homeworld to strangers. This is bait. Something wants us to go there. Something wants us to walk into a snare." "Or," said Sale Mora quietly, "it is exactly what it says. An offer. Made without fear, because the ones who sent it are not afraid of what we might do with it." Cass turned to her, his expression hard. "Ambassador, with respect, that is either the bravest thing I have ever heard, or the most foolish. No fleet, no empire, no species, is that confident without reason." "Then perhaps," Sale said, "we should ask why they feel that confident, instead of guessing." The council argued for hours. Some wanted to destroy the ship before it came any closer, calling it too great a risk to allow near-populated space. Others wanted to capture it, to study its technology, to learn who had built something that could travel this far without visible fear. A few, a small and quiet few, wondered if perhaps they should simply talk to it. While they argued, the ship kept moving. It did not slow down when compact patrol vessels moved into intercept position. It did not speed up either. 6 armed cruisers, bristling with weapons and shielded to withstand small fleet engagements, formed a loose ring around the newcomer, weapons charged, waiting only for the order to fire. The dark ship did not react to the ring closing around it. It simply kept broadcasting. "Attention, this vessel carries no weapon aimed at you. This vessel carries no intention to harm you. This vessel carries coordinates. Use them as you wish." Aboard the lead cruiser, Captain Yeshi Ondu watched the strange vessel on her main screen and felt something she rarely felt after 30 years in the fleet. She felt unsettled, not because the ship looked dangerous, though its lines were sharp and its hull was built for war, but because of how it behaved. It was not trying to escape. It was not trying to fight. It moved like something that had already accepted whatever might happen to it, and had decided the coordinates mattered more than its own safety. "Sensors," she said. "Anything from the crew? Life signs? Communication attempts? Anything?" "One life sign reading, Captain," her sensor officer replied. "Strong. Steady. Whatever is in there, it is alone." "Alone," Yeshi repeated. She looked at the ship again, its long black hull drifting silent and patient between 6 armed warships that could have turned it to dust in seconds. One person, flying a warship that size, straight into the middle of a fleet that could kill it 100 times over, and it is not even trying to defend itself. "Orders, Captain?" her weapons officer asked, hand hovering near the firing controls. Yeshi hesitated. Every instinct built from 3 decades of service told her to open fire, to remove the unknown threat before it could reveal whatever purpose it truly carried. But something else, something quieter, told her to wait. The single voice in her mind was that of her grandmother, an old woman who had survived the last great war against the pirate fleets of the Outer Rim, who used to say that the bravest enemies were rarely the loudest, and the most dangerous ones were the ones who did not need to shout. "Hold fire," she said. "Open a channel. Let us hear what it has to say directly, instead of the recording." The channel opened. For a long moment, there was nothing but static. Then a voice answered, calm, unhurried, almost gentle, speaking a language the translators processed instantly and without struggle, as though it had been built for exactly this purpose. "This is the Terran vessel Silent Herald," the voice said. "I am Captain Idris Marn, sole crew member, acting under the authority of the Terran Federation. I carry a message and a location. I do not carry hostile intent toward your fleet or your people. I ask only that the message reach those who can act on it. If your assembly wishes to speak with me directly, I will not resist capture or inspection. I will not run. I have come too far to run now. Captain Yeshiondu stared at her screen for a long moment, absorbing what she had just heard. A single voice, calm as still water, offering itself up without a fight, from a species no one in the room had ever heard of before tonight. Terran, she said quietly, testing the word. Federation. Captain, her communications officer said, should I relay this to the assembly? Yes, Yeshi said. Relay everything. Every word. She paused, still watching the dark, silent ship on her screen, still thinking about a single crew member, willing to fly straight into the guns of a fleet that could destroy him 100 times over, simply to make sure a message was heard. And tell the assembly this. Whoever these Terrans are, they either have no fear of us at all, or they are far more afraid of something else. Back in the assembly hall, the message arrived, and silence spread through the chamber once more. Sael Mora, ambassador of the Iliane, closed her eyes for a moment, as if steadying herself against something she could not yet name. General Cass frowned, arms crossed, still certain a trap lay somewhere beneath the calm words. Counselor Brenna Ost read the transcript twice, then a third time, searching for the trick, the hidden threat, the demand that must surely follow. There was none. Only the coordinates. Only the offer. Only a single soul, alone in a warship built for battle, who had crossed unknown distances to hand over the one secret every species in the galaxy guarded above all others, the location of home. Bring the ship in, Sael said finally, breaking the silence. Let it dock. Let us hear the rest of what Captain Marn has to say. Because I do not think, she added, looking around at the frightened, uncertain faces of her fellow counselors, that this is the beginning of an invasion. I think it is a warning, and I think we had better listen closely, because something out there frightened an entire species badly enough that they decided being found was safer than staying hidden. Far above the debating chamber, held gently within the grip of 6 warships that had not fired a single shot, the silent herald drifted forward at its own unhurried pace, still repeating its message to the stars, patient as ever, waiting for someone, anyone, to finally understand that it had not come to conquer. It had come to warn them, and somewhere far behind it, in the direction of the coordinates it carried, the true danger was already moving. The silent herald was brought aboard the compact's largest station, a massive ring of metal called Threshold Anchor that orbited the border world of Keth. It took 2 full days for the engineers to agree that the ship carried no hidden weapons pointed at the station, no viruses buried in its systems, nothing that could harm them the moment they let their guard down. Captain Idris Marn waded through all of it without complaint, sitting quietly in a small holding room, watched by cameras and armed guards who were not sure if they were protecting the station from him, or protecting him from a station full of frightened people. When they finally brought him before the assembly, the room went silent the moment he walked in. He was not what anyone expected. No one had known what to expect exactly, but whatever picture their minds had built, something huge, something armored, something with claws or scales or a dozen eyes, it was not this. Idris Marn was simply a man, tall, lean, dark-haired, with lines on his face that spoke of years spent somewhere hard, and eyes that were tired, in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He wore a plain gray uniform with no medals, no rank markings beyond a small patch on his shoulder that read, Terran Federation, in a script none of them recognized until the translators caught up. He did not look dangerous. That was, in its own way, the most unsettling thing about him. A being that looked dangerous could be measured, prepared for, feared in a way that made sense. A being that looked ordinary, who had flown alone, into the heart of an armed fleet without hesitation, was much harder to understand. Captain Marn, said Sael Mora, rising from her seat to greet him. Thank you for your patience. We have many questions. I expected you would, Idris said. His voice was calm, the same calm the recording had carried, but up close, there was something else beneath it. Exhaustion, old and deep, the kind that came from carrying something heavy for far too long. I will answer what I can. Some of it will be hard to hear. Start simply, General Cass said, still standing with his arms crossed, still watching the human, as though expecting a trick to reveal itself at any moment. Where is Terra? What is the Terran Federation? Why does a species that has clearly never made contact with us before Know our languages well enough for your ship to translate perfectly." Idris allowed himself a small, tired smile. "We have been listening for a long time," he said. "Longer than you would guess. Terra is what you would call our homeworld. A single planet, one star, ordinary in most ways. We built our civilization there over many thousands of years, mostly fighting among ourselves before we ever looked outward. When we did look outward, and when we began to hear the signals leaking out from your worlds, old broadcasts, old chatter, the same kind of noise every growing civilization spills into the dark before it learns to be quiet. We listened. We learned. We built systems that could translate almost anything, long before we ever built a ship that could reach you." "You have been listening to us," Brenna Ost said slowly, without ever making contact. "Yes. For how long?" "Longer than any of you have been alive," Idris said. "Terra is not close to here. It never has been. We are, by most measurements your assembly would use, isolated, alone, at the far edge of what your star charts call the dead reach, in a stretch of space so quiet and unremarkable that no one ever thought to look there for anything important. That isolation kept us hidden. It also kept us safe, until now." "Until what, exactly?" Sale asked gently. Idris was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, not louder, but heavier, each word placed carefully, like a man setting down something fragile. "There is a fleet," he said, "moving through the dead reach. It did not come from your side of the galaxy. It came from somewhere else, somewhere none of your ships have ever charted, somewhere even our deepest listening posts only detected because we were watching so carefully, for so long. This fleet does not send warnings, it does not offer terms, it does not ask for surrender before it attacks. It simply arrives, and by the time anyone notices, it is already too late to organize a defense." "You are describing a raider fleet," General Cass said. "We have dealt with raiders before." "No," Idris said. "You have not dealt with anything like this. I have seen the recordings. I have seen what is left after they pass through a system. It is not raiding. It is not conquest. Not in the way your Dominion enemies practice conquest, taking territory and people to use. This fleet does not want your worlds. It does not want your people as slaves or subjects. It removes. It clears. And then it moves on to the next system, and the next, working its way steadily toward the more populated regions of the galaxy, toward the very borders your assembly protects." Silence spread through the chamber, heavier than before. Sael Mora's hands, folded in her lap, had gone very still. "Terra detected this fleet's path more than a decade ago," Idris continued. "We tracked it. We studied it. We built models of where it was heading, and every model pointed the same direction. First through the dead reach, where almost nothing lives, and then outward, toward compact space, toward Dominion space, toward every settled world your two powers have spent centuries building. It will take years yet before it reaches you in force, but it is coming, and when our leaders finally understood that this fleet's path would eventually cross paths with beings other than ourselves, we had a choice to make." "What choice?" Brenna asked. "We could stay hidden," Idris said. "Terra is small compared to what you have built here. You're compact, the Dominion, all the species and colonies spread across this region. We could have stayed quiet, protected our own system as best we could, and let this threat reach you without warning, the same way it nearly reached us without warning. Many people back home argued exactly that. Stay hidden, stay safe, let the rest of the galaxy solve its own problems. But you did not," Sael said quietly. "No," Idris said, "we did not. Because we know what it is like to face something that comes without warning, something that does not explain itself, something that simply arrives to end you before you understand what is happening. We faced something like that once, a long time ago, in our own history, before we ever left our homeworld. It nearly ended us. We do not wish that on anyone else, even strangers we have never met." He looked around the chamber, at the 9 species watching him with expressions ranging from suspicion to disbelief, to something that was almost hope. "So my government sent me," he said, "not a fleet. Not an army. One ship, one voice, carrying the coordinates of our homeworld, so that you would know we were not hiding anything from you, so that you would understand we were willing to risk everything, including the one secret every civilization protects above all others, simply to make sure you had time to prepare. A fleet arriving without warning would have frightened you as much as it frightened us. I came instead, alone, to explain, and to offer whatever help Terra can give. General Cass studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You expect us to believe, he said slowly, that an entire species decided to reveal its homeworld's location to strangers, purely out of kindness. I expect you to believe what the evidence shows you, Idris said, and for the first time, there was a small edge in his voice, not anger, but something firmer, more certain. I have given you our coordinates. If you decide Terra is a threat, if you decide the safest course is to send your own fleet to destroy us before we can grow stronger, you now have everything you need to do exactly that. I flew here alone, unarmed in any way that matters against a fleet like yours, and placed that decision entirely in your hands. That is not the behavior of a species planning conquest, General. Conquerors do not hand their enemies the keys to their own homes. The chamber was silent again, but this silence felt different, less suspicious, more thoughtful, as the weight of what Idris had just said settled over the gathered counselors. Sail Mora rose slowly from her seat and crossed the chamber floor until she stood directly before him. Her people, the Iliane, had lost 3 border colonies to the Vothrek Dominion in the past 2 years, worlds full of families and children who had never done anything to deserve what came for them. She knew, better than most in that room, what it felt like to watch a threat approach and have no way to stop it in time. Show us, she said quietly. Show us this fleet you speak of. Show us the recordings, the models, everything Terra has learned. If what you say is true, we do not have the luxury of doubting you for long. Idris nodded. I will show you everything, he said. But I must warn you, Ambassador, of one more thing before I do. What is that? The Dead Reach fleet is not the only danger in this, Idris said. There are those who already know it is coming, who have known for some time, and who have chosen to hide that knowledge rather than share it, because knowledge of a coming catastrophe can be used, if a person is cruel enough and patient enough, as a weapon of its own. Terra came to you because we believe you deserve the truth. Not everyone in this galaxy shares that belief. Sael's eyes narrowed slightly. Who? Idris was quiet for a moment, choosing his words with obvious care. I will show you the evidence, he said finally, and let you draw your own conclusions. But I will tell you this much now. The Vothrek Dominion's recent aggression against your border worlds, the sudden push to take territory it never wanted before, the timing of it all, Terra does not believe that is coincidence. We believe someone within the Dominion already knows what is coming from the Dead Reach, and has decided to seize as much territory and as many resources as possible before that fleet arrives, so that whatever survives the coming storm, the Dominion survives strongest. The room erupted into overlapping voices, counselors turning to each other in alarm, in disbelief, in dawning fear as the pieces began to fit together in ways none of them had considered before. Through it all, Idris Marn stood quietly at the center of the chamber, patient as his ship had been patient among the warships that surrounded it, waiting for the galaxy to catch up to what Terra had already understood. Sael Mora did not join the noise around her. She simply watched him, this strange, tired man from a world so far away it had never appeared on any chart she had studied, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The first fragile thread of an alliance that would either save them all, or bind them together for whatever came next. Show us, she said again, quieter this time, meant only for him. Show us everything, and then tell us what Terra thinks we should do about it. Idris met her eyes, and for just a moment, the exhaustion in his face gave way to something else. Resolve, quiet and unshakable. The look of a man who had already decided what came next, long before he ever stepped aboard the Silent Herald. We do not just think, Ambassador, he said. We already have a plan. Whether you choose to be part of it is entirely up to you. The recordings played on the great screen above the assembly floor, for nearly 3 hours, and by the end of it, no one in the chamber was arguing anymore. The images had come from Terran deep space probes, small and quiet machines that had drifted at the edge of the Dead Reach for years, watching, recording, sending back scraps of data across a distance so vast that even light itself took a long time to make the journey home. What they showed was hard to look at and harder to forget. A system with 3 inhabited worlds, unremarkable, unimportant, so far from any major trade route that even the Compact had never bothered to survey it closely. Then, in the space of a single recorded month, that system fell silent. The fleet that did it left no wreckage behind, no bodies, no ruins to mourn over. It simply stripped the worlds bare, of energy, of atmosphere, of every living thing, and moved on, leaving behind planets as dead and empty as if nothing had ever lived there at all. "We call them the Val," Idris said quietly, standing before the screen as the images played. "That is not what they call themselves. We do not know what they call themselves. We do not know if they call themselves anything, or if what drives them is even a kind of thought as you and I understand it. We only know what they leave behind." "How many systems?" Sayelmora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 11 that we have confirmed," Idris said. "Likely more that we have not yet found. All of them along the edge of the Dead Reach. All of them stripped the same way. All of them silent now. At the rate the fleet has been moving, and the direction it has been moving, Terran analysts estimate it will reach the outer edge of compact space within 4 years, perhaps sooner, if it does not pause to consume anything further along the way." General Cass stared at the frozen image of one of the dead worlds, its atmosphere gone, its surface gray and cracked like old bone. He had commanded fleets in 3 wars. He had seen worlds burned by Dominion raids, colonies wiped out by pirates, entire populations lost to plague and famine. He had never seen anything that made his stomach turn the way this did. 4 years, he said slowly. "That is not enough time to build a defense against something like this." "No," Idris agreed. "It is not. Not if the Compact and the Dominion continue fighting each other over border colonies while this fleet approaches unchallenged. That is why Terra came to you now, while there is still time to change course. Every year spent on smaller wars is a year not spent preparing for the one that will actually matter." Counselor Brenna Ost, who had spent the last 3 hours in stunned silence, finally found her voice again. "You said Terra has a plan," she said. "Tell us what it is." Idris nodded, and brought up a new set of images. Not of dead worlds this time, but of ships. Terran ships, sleek and dark like the Silent Herald, though larger, more varied in design, clearly built for different purposes. "Terra cannot fight this fleet alone," he said. "We do not have the numbers. No single species does, not the Compact, not the Dominion, not us. But the Vol fleet is not invincible. Our analysis of the recordings shows weaknesses, patterns in how they attack, gaps in their formation when they consume a system, moments where their defenses are stretched thin because they are focused entirely on stripping a planet rather than protecting themselves. A large enough combined force, properly coordinated, striking at the right moment, could do real damage, perhaps enough to turn them away entirely, or at least delay them long enough for evacuation and further preparation." "You want an alliance," Sayel said. "I want survival," Idris said. "For your people, for mine, for anyone within reach of that fleet's path, an alliance is simply the shape survival needs to take, in this case." He paused, looking around the chamber. "Terra is prepared to commit ships, personnel, and everything we have learned about the Vol to a joint defense force, under whatever command structure the Assembly finds acceptable. We do not ask to lead. We ask only to be included, and to be believed, because every day spent doubting us is a day closer to that fleet's arrival." The chamber fell into debate again, quieter this time, more serious, stripped of the disbelief that had colored the earlier arguments. General Cass, still staring at the images of the dead systems, finally spoke. "Even if the Assembly agrees," he said, "there is still the matter of the Dominion. You said yourself you believe someone within their government already knows about this threat and is using that knowledge to seize territory. If that is true, they will not simply agree to join a defense force. They will see it as weakness to exploit, exactly as they have been doing along the Ilian border for the past 2 years." "That is likely true," Idris admitted. "Which is why Terra has already made contact with certain individuals inside the Dominion who do not share their government's current strategy." That got everyone's attention. "You have people inside the Dominion?" Brenna asked sharply. "Not people, exactly," Idris said. "Sympathizers, officers and officials who joined the aggressive push against compact border worlds because they were ordered to, not because they believe in it, and who have grown uneasy, as the true reason behind the Dominion's recent behavior has slowly leaked out through their own intelligence networks. Terra has spent the last several months quietly confirming which of them might be willing to act against their own government's current course, if given a reason to believe there is a better path forward. That is an incredibly dangerous game to play, Cass said. If the Dominion discovers you meddling in their internal politics, they already know, Idris said simply. Terra does not hide what we are doing, General. That is the entire point. We do not send spies to whisper in the dark and vanish. We send people who are willing to be seen, to be questioned, to explain themselves plainly, because a threat this large cannot be answered with secrets and half-truths. It needs to be answered with the truth, spoken openly, even when that truth is uncomfortable for everyone involved, including us. Sael Mora studied him carefully. There was something in the way he spoke, not arrogance, not the confidence of someone who believed he could not be defeated, but something steadier, something that had clearly been tested and had not broken. She thought of her homeworld, of the families she represented, of the children on the border colonies who had already lost so much to a war that suddenly seemed small and petty compared to what was coming. What do you need from us, specifically? She asked. Not in general terms, specifically. What does the compact need to provide, and by when? Idris looked at her, and something in his tired face eased slightly, as though her question was the first one all night that felt like actual progress, rather than more suspicion to overcome. 3 things, he said. First, ships. But not your entire fleet, but a dedicated force, trained and equipped specifically to operate alongside Terran vessels, learning our tactics and teaching us yours, so that when the time comes, we are not 2 separate forces trying to coordinate blindly, but one force that already knows how the other moves. Second, resources. Terra is not a large world. We do not have unlimited industrial capacity. The compact does. If we are going to build enough ships and enough defenses to matter, we will need materials and manufacturing support that only a coalition of this size can provide. And third, he paused, glancing briefly at Sael before continuing. We need the Dominion to stand down from the Ilian border, and we need it soon. Every ship the compact spends defending against Dominion aggression is a ship that cannot be spared for the defense that actually matters. If we cannot end that smaller conflict, we will not have the strength to survive the larger one. Sael's jaw tightened at the mention of her people's suffering, but she did not argue the point. She had already reached the same conclusion herself, watching the dead worlds on the screen, understanding with sudden and painful clarity how small the border war truly was, compared to what approached from the dead reach. I will bring this to my government, Brenna Ost said finally, rising from her seat. All of it. The recordings, the coordinates, everything Captain Marn has shown us tonight. The Farian Concord will not act alone on something of this size, but I believe, once they see what we have seen, they will understand the stakes as clearly as I do now. As will the Rolconi Fleet Command, General Cass added, though his voice still carried a soldier's caution. I make no promises about how quickly the full compact will move, Captain Marn. Bureaucracy is slow, even when the danger is real. But I will carry this warning to every commander who will listen, and I will not let it sit forgotten on some council desk while the clock runs out. Idris nodded slowly, the exhaustion in his face deepening again now that the weight of his message had finally been delivered. That is all Terra ever asked for, he said. A chance to be heard, and the time to act on what you hear. Sael Mora remained after the others had begun filing out of the chamber, still discussing, still arguing quietly among themselves about the scale of what they had just learned. She approached Idris slowly, studying him with the careful attention of someone who had spent her career learning to read the difference between honest fear and calculated performance. You did not come here only to warn us, she said quietly, once they were mostly alone. There is something else. I could hear it in how you spoke about the Dominion, about your people inside it. You are not just hoping we help you fight the Vol fleet, are you? Idris was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally answered, his voice had dropped lower, more careful, as though this next part mattered more than anything he had said before. No, he admitted, I am not. Terra believes the Vol fleet is the greater threat, and it is. But we also believe that whoever inside the Dominion already knows about it, and chose to use that knowledge to seize territory rather than warn their neighbors, is a danger of a different kind, one that will not go away, even if the Vol fleet is somehow stopped. A threat like the Vol tests what a civilization is willing to do to survive. Some rise to meet it honestly. Others use it as cover for their worst instincts. We need to know, before this is over, which kind of galaxy we are fighting to save. Sael studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly, understanding settling over her like a weight she had not expected to carry tonight, on top of everything else. Then I suppose, she said quietly, we had better find out together. Outside the chamber, unnoticed by either of them, a small data packet slipped quietly out through one of the station's older communication relays, encoded in a pattern the compact's own security systems did not recognize as anything unusual. It carried a short, simple message, addressed to a receiver far beyond compact space, deep within Dominion territory, where someone had been waiting a long time to learn exactly what the humans knew, and exactly how much time was left before their carefully hidden plans would need to change. 6 weeks passed before the compact's answer finally came, and when it did not come in the form anyone expected. It came as an attack. The border colony of Halvith Station, a small mining outpost near the edge of Ilian territory, had been quiet for months, mostly forgotten by both sides of the slow-burning conflict between the Compact and the Dominion. That changed in the middle of the night cycle, when 3 Dominion battlecruisers dropped out of hyperspace, directly above the station without warning, weapons already charged. Idris Marn was 3 systems away when the alert reached him, aboard a joint command vessel the Compact had hastily assembled to coordinate the growing defense effort. He had spent the past 6 weeks working almost without rest, helping train Compact crews in Terran tactics, reviewing Vol fleet data with military analysts from 4 different species, and quietly meeting with the handful of Dominion contacts Terra had cultivated over the past year. He had not slept properly in days. When the alert came through, he was awake instantly anyway, some old instinct in him recognizing the shape of disaster before his mind had even finished processing the words on the screen. Halvith Station is under attack, the comms officer reported, her voice tight with alarm. 3 Dominion battlecruisers, no warning given, no demands made. They are firing directly on the colony's outer ring. Casualties? Idris asked, already moving toward the command deck. Unknown. Communications from the station went dark almost immediately. We have maybe 2,000 civilians there, mostly Ilian mining families. Sail Mora was already on the command deck when Idris arrived, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the console so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She had grown up near colonies like Halvith. She knew families there personally. This makes no sense, General Cass said, standing beside her, his expression grim. The Dominion has not attacked an undefended civilian colony directly in years, not since the early days of the border conflict. Their recent strategy has been territorial pressure, blockades, forced negotiations. Not this. Not an outright massacre of a mining outpost with no strategic value. It has value, Idris said quietly, and everyone on the deck turned to look at him. Halvith sits directly on the flight path between here and the coordinates Terra provided for our home system. It is not a target chosen at random, General. It is a message. A message to whom? Sail demanded, though something in her voice suggested she already feared the answer. To us, Idris said. To everyone in this room, and everyone that has been working these past 6 weeks to build a defense against the Vol fleet. Someone inside the Dominion learned how far our preparations have come, and they do not want that alliance to succeed. Destroying Halvith accomplishes 2 things at once. It forces the Compact to respond militarily, pulling ships and attention away from Vol preparation and back toward border defense. And it sends a clear signal to anyone in the Dominion who might be considering cooperation with us, that defiance of the current leadership's course will be answered with exactly this kind of brutality. Cass's jaw tightened. Then we have no choice. We must respond. Agreed, Idris said, but how we respond matters more than anything else right now. If we send the full Compact fleet in blind fury, we lose ships and time we cannot spare, and we play directly into whatever plan is being run against us. We need to think, not react. There are 2,000 civilians dying right now, Sail said, her voice breaking slightly. I am sorry, Captain Marn, but I cannot think calmly about strategy while my people are being slaughtered. Idris turned to her, and for a moment, the exhaustion in his face gave way to something harder, more focused. I am not asking you to think calmly, Ambassador, he said. I am asking you to trust me for the next 10 minutes, because I believe we can save far more of those 2,000 people with a fast, precise response than with an angry, disorganized one. The Silent Herald is faster than anything in the compact fleet. I can be at Halveth in 11 minutes if I leave now. Send the nearest compact response wing behind me, but tell them to hold at the edge of the system until I signal. I need to see what we are actually facing before we commit a larger force that could be walking into exactly the trap the enemy wants us to walk into. Cass studied him for a long moment, weighing the decision with the caution of a man who had learned the hard way that impulsive orders killed as many soldiers as enemy fire did. Finally he nodded. "Go," he said. "I will have the response wing ready to move on your signal, Captain. Do not make me regret this." The Silent Herald tore away from the command vessel at a speed that made even the compact's most advanced engineers stare in disbelief, cutting across the distance to Halveth Station in a blur of controlled violence that no vessel in the room had ever witnessed a single cruise ship achieve. Idris sat alone in the cockpit, the familiar hum of the engines around him, and let the old, cold calm settle over his mind the way it always did before a fight. Not fearlessness, never that, but something quieter. Something that had been trained into him across years he did not like to think about too closely. He arrived at Halveth to find the outer ring of the station already burning, atmosphere venting into space in great silver plumes, escape pods scattering outward in desperate, disorganized clusters as the 3 Dominion battlecruisers continued their bombardment with methodical, unhurried cruelty. Idris did not hesitate. The Silent Herald was not built like the massive compact cruisers, bristling with dozens of weapon batteries meant for slow, grinding fleet battles. It was built for something else entirely: speed, precision, and a weapons array designed by Terran engineers who had studied centuries of their own violent history and distilled from it the hardest, most efficient lessons about how a single well-placed strike could matter more than 100 wasted ones. He came in low and fast, weaving between the battlecruiser's point defense fire with a precision that would have looked impossible to anyone who had not spent years training for exactly this kind of engagement. His first strike hit the lead battlecruiser's engine array directly, a coordinated burst of fire that Terran targeting systems had calculated in less than a second, crippling the massive ship's ability to maneuver without destroying it outright. His second strike, seconds later, tore through the shield generator of the second cruiser, leaving it exposed and vulnerable. The third cruiser turned its full attention toward the Silent Herald, weapons blazing, clearly recognizing that this single small ship was not behaving like anything they had encountered before. Idris flew through the incoming fire like a man who had done this 1,000 times, because in truth, in the simulations and drills of his training, he very nearly had. He did not try to outgun the battlecruiser. He simply refused to be where its weapons expected him to be, cutting sharp, unpredictable angles through space that made the massive ship's targeting systems struggle to track him, buying himself the seconds he needed to line up his next strike. "Compact response wing," he said into his comm, voice steady, despite the violence unfolding around him. "Halveth Station is under sustained attack. 3 Dominion battlecruisers, 2 now disabled. I am engaging the third. Move in now. Prioritize civilian evacuation over engagement. I will hold their attention as long as I can." Behind him, the compact response wing surged forward, a dozen cruisers braking hard toward Halveth at Cass's order, weapons ready but formation disciplined, evacuation shuttles already launching from their hangars even before they reached the burning station. The third battlecruiser, realizing it now faced not only the strange fast ship but an incoming compact fleet as well, made the calculation every trained commander eventually makes when a battle turns against them. It began to withdraw, engines flaring as it attempted to break away toward a hyperspace jump point before it could be surrounded. Idris let it go. "Belay pursuit," he said, cutting hard away from the retreating cruiser and back toward the burning station instead. "Civilians first. Always civilians first. The ship that ran will keep for another day." For the next 2 hours, the Silent Herald worked alongside the arriving compact fleet, guiding evacuation shuttles through the wreckage, using its own weapons to clear debris fields that threatened to crush fleeing pods, and at one point, flying directly into the collapsing outer ring of the station itself to pull free a group of trapped mining families whose escape route had been sealed by falling debris. It was not the kind of fighting anyone back on the command deck had trained for. It was desperate, close, and human, in a way that made even the most hardened compact soldiers watching the feeds go quiet. By the time the fires were finally under control, Halveth Station had lost nearly 400 people, a devastating number, a number that would haunt Sail Mora for the rest of her life, but it was a fraction of what it could have been. Without the Silent Herald's speed and the swift, disciplined response that followed, compact analysts later estimated the death toll would have exceeded 1,800. Sael arrived at Halveth 6 hours later aboard a relief transport, and found Idris still there, helping direct the last of the medical evacuations, his uniform scorched and torn, exhaustion written into every line of his face. She approached him slowly, watching the survivors being carried past on stretchers, watching the small children clinging to whatever family members remained to hold them. "You saved hundreds of lives today," she said quietly. "I could not save all of them," Idris said, and his voice cracked slightly on the words, the first real crack in his composure since he had arrived on compact soil weeks ago. "I was 11 minutes away. 11 minutes, Ambassador. In this kind of fight, that is an eternity." Sael was quiet for a moment, watching him, understanding suddenly and completely that the calm, steady confidence he had carried into the assembly hall was not the absence of grief. It was grief, disciplined and controlled, carried by someone who had learned long ago that falling apart helped no one, even when falling apart was exactly what the moment deserved. "This attack was meant to break the alliance before it truly began," she said, "to frighten the compact away from cooperation, to punish anyone in the Dominion who might have considered helping us." "Yes," Idris said. "Did it work?" Idris looked at her, and something in his exhausted eyes hardened into something else. Not anger exactly, but resolve, cold and absolute. "No," he said. "It did the opposite. Whoever ordered this attack wanted to remind everyone how dangerous defiance can be. Instead, they reminded us exactly why this alliance matters. I do not think General Cass will hesitate the next time this assembly needs to vote on committing real resources to our defense. I do not think the Ferry and Concord will need much more convincing either, once they hear what happened here today." Sael looked out over the wreckage of Halveth Station, the survivors being loaded onto transports, the bodies still being recovered from the wreckage, and felt something settle in her chest that was equal parts grief and grim determination. "Then let us make sure their sacrifice means something," she said quietly. "Let us finish what you came here to start, Captain Marn. All of it. The alliance, the defense against the Vol fleet, and whatever needs to be done to stop whoever within the Dominion decided that murdering 2,000 miners was an acceptable price to pay for their own ambitions." Idris nodded slowly, looking out at the same wreckage, the same grief, the same terrible cost of a war he had hoped this alliance could prevent from spreading further. "Terra is with you," he said quietly. "All the way to the end of this, Ambassador, whatever that end turns out to be." Far above them, unseen in the chaos of rescue and recovery, a single stealth-cloaked drone hung silently in the debris field, recording everything: the human ship's tactics, its weapons capabilities, its willingness to sacrifice itself for strangers it had known only a matter of weeks. When the recording was finally complete, the drone slipped quietly away into hyperspace, carrying its data back toward the same hidden receiver, deep within Dominion territory, that had received the earlier warning. Someone, far away and carefully hidden, was watching everything unfold exactly as they had hoped it would, and taking careful, patient notes on precisely how much more force it would take to break the fragile alliance being forged in the fires of Halveth Station. The attack on Halveth Station changed everything, just as Idris had predicted it would. Within a week, the Ferry and Concord voted unanimously to commit ships and resources to the joint defense effort against the Vol fleet. The Rolconi fleet, under General Cass's direct recommendation, began reorganizing its border patrols to free up warships for combined training exercises with Terran crews. Even the smaller delegations within the assembly, species that had spent the earlier debates staying quiet and cautious, began stepping forward with offers of support, industrial capacity, raw materials, volunteer crews eager to be part of something larger than the slow, grinding border conflict that had defined their lives for years. But the true turning point came 3 weeks after Halveth, when a single encrypted transmission reached the assembly through a channel no one recognized. It came from inside the Dominion. The message was short, and it changed the shape of the coming conflict entirely. It was signed by Fleet Marshal Torrin Vex, one of the most senior military commanders within the Dominion's high command, a man who had spent the past 2 years publicly supporting the aggressive push against compact border territory. Privately, the message revealed, he had grown increasingly troubled by what he had learned about the true reasoning behind that push, reasoning that had nothing to do with territorial ambition, and everything to do with a small circle within the Dominion's ruling council, who had learned of the Vol fleet's approach nearly 2 years earlier, and had chosen to hoard that knowledge rather than share it. They believe the Vol fleet cannot be stopped, the message read, translated carefully by Terran systems, and shared immediately with the full assembly. They believe the only rational response is to seize as much territory, as many resources, and as much military strength as possible before it arrives, so that the Dominion survives strongest among whatever remains after the Vol have passed through. They see the Compact's border worlds, not as neighbors to be warned, but as resources to be claimed, while there is still time. Halveth Station was not a mistake, or an overreaction. It was a calculated message, meant to fracture your growing alliance before it could threaten this plan. Idris read the message twice, standing beside Sail Mora in the Assembly's private strategy room, and felt something in his chest that was not quite relief and not quite anger, but some tangled mixture of both. "He is willing to help us," Sail said quietly, reading over the message again herself. "Fleet Marshal Vex, he is offering to turn against his own government's leadership. Not against the Dominion itself," Idris said carefully. "Against the small group of people making these decisions in secret. There is a difference, and it matters. If we handle this correctly, we do not need to fight the entire Dominion. We need only to help the parts of it that still believe in honesty and survival for everyone, not just themselves, take back control from the parts that do not. And if we handle it incorrectly?" Idris was quiet for a moment. "Then we turn a hidden conspiracy into an open civil war," he said. "At the exact moment the galaxy can least afford one, with the Vol fleet still approaching, and no time left to waste on internal conflict. We must move carefully, Ambassador, more carefully than anything we have done so far." What followed was not another battle, not in the way Halveth had been a battle, but something quieter and in many ways more dangerous. A careful, coordinated effort between Terran intelligence, Fleet Marshal Vex's network of sympathetic officers, and a small, trusted circle within the Compact Assembly, all working to expose the Hidden Council's plans before they could do further damage. It took another 2 months of careful work, of coded messages and quiet meetings, and moments where everything nearly fell apart, before the truth was finally laid bare before the full Dominion Senate, undeniable and impossible to hide any longer. The Hidden Council's plan collapsed under the weight of its own exposure. Some of its members fled into hiding. Others were arrested by their own military, led by officers who had grown as disgusted by the deception as Fleet Marshal Vex himself. Within a month, a new Dominion leadership emerged, one willing to withdraw from the contested Ilian border and commit, cautiously but genuinely, to the growing defense coalition against the Vol fleet. Sail Mora stood on the observation deck of the newly formed coalition fleet's flagship, a massive vessel built through combined Compact, Dominion, and Terran engineering, and watched through the great viewport as ships from a dozen different worlds moved into formation together for the first time. It was a sight she never imagined she would see. Old enemies flying alongside each other, learning each other's tactics, preparing together for a threat that made all their old conflicts seem small and foolish by comparison. Idris joined her at the viewport, looking older than he had when she first met him, the weight of the past months etched permanently into his face. But there was something else there too, something that had not been present in that first meeting in the assembly hall. A quiet kind of hope, hard-won and fragile, but real. 2 years, he said, looking out at the assembled fleet. That is how long the coalition analysts now estimate we have, before the Vol fleet reaches the outer edge of populated space. 2 years to finish building this fleet, to train these crews, to prepare defenses strong enough to actually make a difference. Is it enough time? Sail asked. Idris considered the question honestly, the way he always did, refusing to offer comfortable lies, even when comfortable lies might have been easier to hear. I do not know, he admitted. It might be enough, it might not, but it is more time than we would have had if Terra had stayed hidden. and more time than the Dominion's true leadership would have given us, if that hidden council had been allowed to continue its plans unchecked. It is more than we had 6 months ago. That will have to be enough, because it is what we have. Sael was quiet for a moment, watching the fleet below them, thinking of Halveth Station, of the 400 lives lost there, of everything that had led to this moment. When you first arrived, she said slowly, alone, unarmed against 6 warships, offering us your homeworld's coordinates, without any guarantee, we would not simply destroy you where you stood. I thought it was either the bravest thing I had ever seen, or the most foolish. I remember saying almost exactly that to General Cass. And now? Idris asked. Now I think it was neither, Sael said. I think it was simply honest. You told us the truth, at real risk to yourself and your people, because you believed the truth was the only thing that could actually save us. I do not think I understood, that first night, how rare that really is. Idris looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, something in his tired expression eased into what might almost have been called peace. Terra learned a long time ago, he said quietly, the hard way, that hiding from a threat never truly protects you. It only delays the moment you have to face it, usually with less time to prepare, and fewer people willing to stand beside you when it finally arrives. We did not want that delay for you. We did not want you to face the Vol fleet the same way we very nearly had to face our own history. Alone, unprepared, and out of time. Below them, the Coalition fleet continued its slow, careful maneuvers, ships from a dozen worlds learning to move as one, preparing for a war that would test everything they had built together in these short, difficult months. It was not a perfect alliance. There were still tensions between old enemies, still grief for those lost at Halveth and in the border conflicts before it, still uncertainty about whether 2 years would truly be enough time to prepare for what was coming from the Dead Reach. But it was real. It had been built honestly, on truth freely given, rather than secrets carefully hoarded, and in a galaxy that had spent centuries learning to distrust strangers on principle. That honesty had become the foundation of something stronger than any single fleet, or any single species, could have built alone. Far beyond the edge of charted space, in the cold dark of the Dead Reach, the Vol fleet continued its slow, patient advance, indifferent to the alliance being forged against it, unaware or uncaring that the worlds ahead of it were no longer as unprepared as the 11 systems it had already consumed. It would arrive when it arrived, vast and silent and hungry, exactly as it always had. But this time, when it came, it would not find worlds caught by surprise, undefended and alone. It would find a coalition, built from old enemies, who had learned to trust each other, because one small, dark warship had once crossed an impossible distance to hand over its homeworld's coordinates, asking for nothing in return, except the chance to be believed. Captain Idris Marn stood at the viewport beside Sail Mora, watching the fleet that Terra's warning had made possible, and allowed himself, for the first time in a very long time, to hope that when the Vol finally arrived, they would not find the easy, silent victory they had found 10 times before. They would find, instead, a galaxy that had chosen, at the last possible moment, to stand together instead of falling apart, and somewhere far behind that gathered fleet, on a small, quiet world called Terra, an entire species waited to see whether the truth they had risked everything to share would be enough to save them all. The end.